which I always feel needs to be light, well balanced, and that sort of thing, and you're throwing it out of clay that just isn't going to give you that, you know, you're cheating yourself. So I think clay preparation is the first place you start, and what I would choose to do is I would choose to knead my clay for tomorrow today, and I would take each lump of clay and probably knead it 200 times, and then bag it and let it set, and then work from that the next day.
For a lump of clay, would that be like a bag's amount? Like a 25-pound lump, or are you talking like the 2-pound lumps?
How about 50 pounds?
50 pounds.
Whatever you think you're going to be working on. You know, that's just one of those things that you learn in time. Anyway, I'm not. This. Somebody hasn't said, Don, you're laboring. You're supposed to tell me when I do this. So, anyway, this gets me close to what I want. I am not going to labor on this. So, you know, I'd like that surface to be a little smoother. Like a lot of things to change, but you don't always get that.
Do you like to leave your presence on the pot, like throwing rings and that sort of thing?
Sometimes, but you know, that's a decision that I think you have to think about where you're going with either glazing or that sort of thing. And somebody who, whether you really like to think about it or not, is really important to everybody in this room who works with clay, was a man by the name of Dave Shaner. And Dave Shaner said complex things in very simple terms. And he said at one time, it's really hard to decorate a plowed field. And so you have to really think hard about what it is you're making and where you want that piece to be when at the end. Because I think that you know, you say those few words and all of a sudden you can think about every pot you've made and what you would have liked to have changed in the surface to have made it a better pot. Yeah, it's not too bad a shape. I'm going to do a picture after this, and I was driving out here with the heater going pretty strong, trying to get. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where I used to work in the basement. And the basement was, there's so many really, really great things about working in the basement. But one of the things is that, as far as clay is concerned, is that the environment doesn't change significantly from summer to winter. And timing for me is really, really an important thing in terms of getting what I want, you know, to accomplish complex pieces. Anytime you have assembly of any kind, timing is really the one thing that really matters. And the basement always gave me real consistent sort of thing. I mean, I knew that I was going to make the bodies for... This is why we bring a lot of clay. Anyway, if you're in control of the consistency of the clay, then there's a great deal of joy that goes into assembling pots. And if your timing is wrong, putting together complex pieces is a real pain. And anyway, the basement was really an ideal. But anyway, so I am working above ground. I've managed to recreate a cave in the space that I'm renting, so it's dark and dingy just like the basement was, but it changes daily depending upon the weather. And I left this picture form out, which I'm going to trim shortly, thinking that, gee, yesterday morning was a really nice day, and I laid a piece of plastic over it, and shortly after I left the studio, we went back to this other environment that we seem to be stuck in. And, so it was too wet this morning. That's the speed thing on this wheel.
How do you teach tapping on stone? I've never figured out how to do it.
To tap, I think left-handed people are advantaged. I also think when it comes to trimming, left-handed people are advantaged. And I'll explain that. But I'm tapping over here, and I think for some reason it makes a difference. You're tapping here and you're not seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. Does that make sense?
I have a story along those lines. The guy I studied with in Northern Gibbs Run, he was left-handed. And he would teach all the beginners how to tap. On center was left-handed. As soon as he left the room, I said, "You need right-handed." You're right-handed because everyone's so uncoordinated with their left hand.
Yeah, see,
But then he came out of the office and said, "Don't listen."
And when I throw another piece of clay, I'll talk. This hand is the reason why I couldn't throw, because I was trying to make it be like everybody else's right hand, and it didn't have the ability to go to the same place twice in a row. I mean, it just. You know. And so when I center and everything else, I'm very much all left-handed when I'm doing it. And I do, you know, here I am, I'm teaching beginners to throw, and I'm having to teach myself to be right-handed in order to teach them to throw. But anyway, there are these things. I'm just not having success at sticking things together. When I was working at Pacific Stoneware, which I mentioned at the very beginning, and I was slip casting, this is going to be a long way around story, but it'll all come to an end when I get done with this bottle. I did do slip casting, and I did it for a short period of time. I worked as a glazer, and it was not unusual for me to glaze 3,000 pieces in a day. That meant waxing them, getting them glazed and cleaned up, and on the way to the kiln. And I think that those are things that are really important. But down in the basement of Pacific Stoneware, and I would be curious to see if they still are down there, because the building does exist. There were some wheels that had been used by the guys who really threw pots sometime in the late 1800s. And they were all tied to a motor by these big leather belts. And you stood at a bench and there were a whole series of wheels, and it was the same big leather belt that ran all the wheels. And there was a metal thing that you caught your hip, basically, so you had something to lean into. And I would go down there on Saturdays and I would, I'll say, throw pots or try to throw pots. Anyway, the wheels never stopped. So that meant you threw the clay on the wheel, you threw the pot, you cut it off, and you got it off the wheel without the wheel stopping. It wasn't a blistering speed, but it was this constant speed. And that is another, what do I want to call it, skill builder, something like that. It forces you to treat clay differently. And being comfortable with that sort of thing, I think also is an awfully nice thing to have